Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, text talks between Narad and King Prachin Barhi, text number 69 onwards. Satvaika nishthe manasi bhagvat parshva vartini tamaschandram asi vedam uparajyav abhasate. Krishna consciousness means constantly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in such a mental state that the devotee can observe the cosmic manifestation exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does. Such observation is not always possible, but it becomes manifest exactly like the dark planet known as Rahu, which is observed in the presence of the full moon. It has been explained in the previous verse that all desires on the mental platform become visible one after another. Sometimes, however, by the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the whole stockpile can be visible all at one time. In Brahma Samhita, it is said, Karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. When a person is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, his stockpile of material desires is minimized. Indeed, the desires no longer fructify in the form of gross bodies. Instead, the stockpile of desires becomes visible on the mental platform by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the desires are there, but when we start taking shelter of Krishna, then these desires, which are supposed to get converted into another gross body, they start just becoming visible on the mental platform, and they slowly go away from there. Once I heard in a lecture by a devotee that many times we see we are doing some things in our dreams which are not very, very good things, good karmas. But he explained that it is that Krishna is removing those desires so we don't do them physically in the gross body. So he's just removing those desires in the dream in a mental body. So that is also possible that Krishna can do anything. It's only the mercy of Krishna. He can do everything. So sometimes it is like in the previous verse we were reading yesterday, it could be something that we have witnessed in the previous lifetimes, or it could be mercy of Krishna. He's removing those desires, those activities. So we don't have to suffer for those karmas. In this connection, the darkness occurring before the full moon, the lunar eclipse, can be explained as being another planet known as Rahu. According to Vedic astronomy, the Rahu planet, which is not visible, is accepted. Sometimes the Rahu planet is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet, Rahu. Actually, they're not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they came back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment. And he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. So for this moon exploration, when Prabhupada was here in America in 68, sometime like that, America said we went to moon. And Prabhupada was watching it on live TV, and Prabhupada said they didn't go to moon. So many, many disciples of Prabhupada, they just couldn't take it. They thought Prabhupada is envious of the achievements of America, and they left. But the disciples who remained with Prabhupada, they understood what Prabhupada was saying. So he said either they went to this Rahu planet. He said, first of all, they didn't go. They couldn't have gone because moon is a heavenly planet. So either they didn't go, it is all staged, or if they went, it must be Rahu planet. So this is what Prabhupada is saying here. So they could have gone to this invisible planet, Rahu. But again, if it is invisible, how could anything land over there? And if it is invisible, then how come it creates this lunar eclipse? So maybe it is invisible to our eyes. It's not actually invisible. Anyway, whatever the case may be. But that the moon exploration was later proved to be a hoax, actually. Nobody claimed it to be true afterwards. But point Prabhupada is making that living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment. And these desires just don't go away so easily as we think they will. Even for yogis who sit in the cave and they say, we're not going to engage in any sense gratification, still it is so difficult for them. No living entity is free from the cycle of birth and death unless it takes to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated, Sattvic Nishthe, that when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in one stroke is freed from past and future mental desires. Then by the grace of the Supreme Lord, everything becomes simultaneously manifest within the mind. In this regard, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cites the example of Mother Yashoda's seeing the whole cosmic manifestation within the mouth of Lord Krishna. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Mother Yashoda saw all the universes and planets within the mouth of Krishna. Similarly, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, a Krishna conscious person can see all his dormant desires at one time and finish all his future transmigrations. This facility is especially given to the devotee to make his path clear for returning home back to Godhead. So this is what Krishna can do. I mean, once we start taking this process seriously, or take up this process of Bhakti Yoga, then we don't come in the jurisdiction of Yamaraj. We come under the jurisdiction of Krishna directly. Then all our karmas, reactions, everything is in the hand of Krishna. And then he sees how serious we are. And if there are some desires which are prohibiting or preventing us from taking full shelter, surrendering fully to Krishna, he can do whatever he likes. He can either give us more karmic reactions than we were supposed to get and take full shelter of Krishna, or he can remove the karmic reactions completely. Whatever he wants, he can do. But also these desires, he can just remove all of them. When we see things not experienced in this life, why we see things not experienced in this life is explained herein. That which we see is a future expression of a gross body, or is already stocked in our mental stockpile. Because a Krishna conscious person does not have to accept a future gross body, his recorded desires are nullified in a dream. We therefore sometimes find things in a dream never experienced in our present life. So it could be the recorded desires are fulfilled in a dream. And then we don't have to suffer for the reactions of those activities, of those desires. Naham mameti bhavoyam purushe vyavadhiyate yavad buddhi mano aksharth guna vyuho hi anadiman. As long as there exists a subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exists as well. The desire of the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego cannot be fulfilled without a gross body composed of material elements, earth, water, air, fire, and ether. When the gross material body is not manifest, the living entity cannot factually act in the modes of material nature. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the subtle activities of the mind and intelligence continue due to sufferings and enjoyments of the living entity's subtle body. The consciousness of material identification, such as I and mine, still continues because such consciousness has been extant from time immemorial. However, when one transfers to the spiritual world by virtue of understanding Krishna consciousness, the actions and reactions of both gross and subtle bodies no longer bother the spirit soul. So when one transfers to the spiritual world, so that transfer can take place here only while we are still in this material body. This is the power of Bhakti Yoga. So the actions and reactions of both the gross and subtle bodies no longer bother the spirit soul. Supti murcha patapeshu pranayan vighatataha nehate aham iti jnanam mrityu prajvarayorapi. When the living entity is in deep sleep, when he faints, when there is some great shock on account of severe loss, at the time of death, or when the body temperature is very high, the movement of the life air is arrested. At that time, the living entity loses knowledge of identifying the body with the self. Foolish people deny the existence of the soul, but it's a fact that when we sleep, we forget the identity of the material body. And when we awake, we forget the identity of the subtle body. In other words, while sleeping, we forget the activities of the gross body. And when active in the gross body, we forget the activities of sleeping. Actually, both states, sleeping and waking, are creations of the illusory energy. The living entity actually has no connection with either the activities of sleep or the activities of the so-called vacant state. When a person is in deep sleep or when he has fainted, he forgets his gross body. Similarly, under chloroform or some other anesthetic, the living entity forgets his gross body and does not feel pain or pleasure during a surgical operation. I'm pretty sure we all have gone through this. And when they give us anesthesia, we just forget. In fact, that is when this bhajan by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it comes into mind. Maro bhi rakho bhi jo ichha tuhar. So actually at that time when we are under the influence of anesthesia, we are completely at the mercy of the surgeon. Maro bhi rakho bhi. You want to kill me? You want to keep me? It's up to you. I have nothing. I cannot do anything. But that should happen when we are awake to Krishna. But so we forget when we are under the influence of anesthesia. Who are we? Where are we? Cannot feel any pain or pleasure. Similarly, when a man is suddenly shocked by some great loss, he forgets his identification with the gross body. At the time of death, when the temperature of the body rises to 107 degrees, the living entity falls into a coma and is unable to identify his gross body. In such cases, the life air that moves within the body is choked up, and the living entity forgets his identification with the gross body. Because of our ignorance of the spiritual body, of which we have no experience, we do not know of the activities of the spiritual body. And in ignorance, we jump from one false platform to another. We act sometimes in relation to the gross body and sometimes in relation to the subtle body. If by Krishna's grace we act in our spiritual body, we can transcend both the gross and subtle bodies. In other words, we can gradually train ourselves to act in the terms of the spiritual body. As stated in Narad Pancharatra, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Tiruchyate. Devotional service means engaging the spiritual body and the spiritual senses in the service of the Lord. When we are engaged in such activities, the actions and reactions of the gross and subtle body cease. Nicely explained by Prabhupada that when we are in deep sleep or any of these conditions, coma or chloroform or at the time of death, we forget our gross body. Then we are acting in a subtle body. And when we are in the awakened state, we are running around doing so many things and thinking so many activities. I have to do so many responsibilities I have. We forget our subtle body, and then we are acting in the gross body. But beyond that, if we act in the spiritual body or do spiritual activities, that means we don't get the reactions of both gross or subtle bodies. So that means we are acting in a spiritual body or on the spiritual platform. And this is what we have to continue to do. Otherwise, next body is there waiting for us to we try to fulfill our material desires in next body. And just like in this body, we feel so frustrated, all our desires are not fulfilled. Same thing is going to happen next body. Material bodies are like that. Garbhe balye api aposhkalya deka dashvidham tada lingam na drishyate yunah kuhva chandramaso yatha. When one is a youth, all the 10 senses and mind are completely visible. However, in the mother's womb or in the boyhood state, the sense organs and the mind remain covered, just as the full moon is covered by the darkness of dark moon night. When a living entity is within the womb, his gross body, the 10 sense organs and the mind are not fully developed. At such a time, the objects of the senses do not disturb him. In a dream, a young man may experience the presence of a young woman because at that time the senses are active. Because of undeveloped senses, a child or boy will not see a young woman in his dreams. The senses are active in youth even when one dreams. And although there may be no young woman present, the senses may act and there may be a seminal discharge, nocturnal emission. The activities of the subtle and gross bodies depend on how developed conditions are. The example of the moon is very appropriate. On a dark moon night, the full shining moon is still present, but it appears not to be present due to conditions. Similarly, the senses of the living entity are there, but they only become active when the gross body and the subtle body are developed. Unless the senses of the gross body are developed, they will not act on the subtle body. Similarly, because of the absence of the desires in the subtle body, there may be no development in the gross body. So Prabhupada is giving amazing examples. So, like a child in the womb of the mother, all his senses are there, but they're not developed. properly for him to act in that way. So when the senses are not developed, he will not even get those dreams or desires. In fact, that was the reason when Brahmaji cursed the four boys who refused to listen to Brahmaji, their father, and they said, "We're not going to get married. We don't want to get married and engage in this business of populating the earth or populating the whole universe." Then Brahmaji cursed them. Okay, you're not going to listen to me. You don't want to get married, so remain like young boys eternally. So they were very happy. Four Kumaras. That's why they called four Kumaras. Kumaras means little boys, and they even if they are naked, nothing would happen because the desires won't be there because they don't have the sense organs developed in that way. So they say, "Oh, this is wonderful for us. Then we can go anywhere and we can perform our tapasya and bhakti, and nothing will disturb us. At least the other sex, they will not disturb us." So we never hear of four Kumaras falling prey to any Apsara. Kamdev never approaches four Kumaras. But when we become young and the senses are active, they're strong, then we get those dreams. And the example of moon is given. So on a dark moon night, it's not that there's no moon. Moon is always there. It's just how much is visible to us. So it is covered by the dark conditions. The full shining moon is still present, but it appears not to be present due to conditions. So similarly, if the desires are not there, now we look at it the other way. So the science says if the body is not present, the desires won't be there. If the senses are not developed, the desires won't be there. Now, on the other hand, for a spiritual practitioner, if he removes those desires or he engages those desires in the service of Krishna, then no development in the gross body at all. So removing those desires, the yogis try to suppress the desires. They say, we're not going to even think of or look at any opposite sex. But it's not practical, especially in Kali Yuga, that the desires will go away. So in devotion service, what we do, we try to give higher taste to the sense object. So we try to dovetail our desires in the service of Krishna. Then the effects on the gross body won't be there. Or at least slowly, it will go away. In fact, other day I was reading in Pakistan, they're trying to implement this rape law that whoever is found guilty of serial offender, in this case is rape, then he will be chemically castrated. And I was trying to read what exactly does it mean. So it means that they're going to inject some kind of chemical in his body, so it goes and affects some organ, some part of the brain, so he will not even get those desires. The desires are going to be completely gone. So when the desires are not there, then he cannot act. So maybe some chemicals are there, but our process is not to do this chemical injection, but to properly engage ourselves so much in the service of the Lord and give the positive desires or transcendental spiritual activities to the senses and to the desires, that we don't even desire to go another way. Because even if some chemicals are inserted, the inclination is not gone. So we want to remove even the inclination of any sinful activity. In fact, any activity, any material desire is sinful, whether good or bad. So we want to remove everything. So it's only possible by engaging more and more seriously in the process of the yoga. So we'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments.